So let me just say in introduction to the two colleagues that are going to follow that really if you were asking the question about where in the world you would be looking in terms of international organizations that maybe are having some of the greatest impacts in education, then we would certainly include within that UNESCO and OECD. I'll come back in a second to OECD, but from UNESCO's point of view, can I just sort of introduce Tarek with the sort of recognition that increasingly in the last couple of years, since Tarek has been involved in this, I have been aware of initiatives that are beginning to have impacts in developing countries, initiatives that are supported by and in partnership with major companies that are beginning to sort of bring together, as it were, a whole range of different countries around the world. And indeed, only sort of yesterday was talking to somebody who was taking me through some of the work that UNESCO are doing in creating young people's vision of where the future might be in terms of education, and no doubt he might share some of that with us. So, Tarek, welcome.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a distinct pleasure, actually, for me to be here and to speak in this beautiful place and to this wonderful crowd. And thanks to the chairman for the kind introduction. Actually, before I start, I want to share with you that in my former life, really before joining UNESCO, I spent over 20 years teaching as a faculty member, actually teaching engineering and applied mechanics and mathematics. So I come to this topic with a passion of being a teacher. I was working at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. This is the place where it witnessed big technological breakthroughs. If you remember, the first browser called Mosaic was developed at Illinois. And Mark Anderson, who later made Netscape, just came as an undergraduate. We worked him out in the summer for $4 per hour, where he developed Mosaic, and that was a fantastic breakthrough. So I witnessed this, which kept me excited. I tried to use technology in my own classes since '95, and I remember teaching to a class of freshmen on elementary mechanics and telling them in '95 that we'll no longer use bulletin boards, we'll use this new thing called the internet. You have to check your accounts in the dorms and so on. And they booed me, actually. 400 people were booing me because they were not used to it. And I had no clue either how to develop HTML, how to write those pages. It was very primitive. This experience was quite effective, and we learned a lot from it. Now, time passes, and I joined UNESCO in '99, working in a field office in Cairo. So I have been operating for 7 years in parts of the developing world. We gained a lot of experience there. Recently, 2 years ago, actually, as Don said, we moved to Paris to run the section on ICTs in education, science, and culture. Let me take you to a quick journey within the organization and tell you what we are trying to do and see how our topic today fits within those plans. Now, UNESCO, for some of you may know and some may not know very clearly, it's the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It's about over 60 years old. It's not retired yet. It's working feverishly. It functions pretty much as a laboratory of ideas and a standard setter. It also serves as a clearinghouse for dissemination and sharing of information and knowledge to our member states. We have 193 member states that we try to serve in the organization. They're assembling next week in our general conference, and they are really our main constituency. Now, just to give you a quick view of how we are structured, we have 5 program sectors. A sector for education, another for natural sciences, for culture, communication, and information. This is where I work. This sector, communication information, has three divisions, one of which is called the Information Society Division, in which our section, which deals with global strategies for ICT in education, is placed. We really, in an abstract way, this sector has programs worldwide that are rooted really in the UNESCO Constitution, which requires us to promote what we call the free flow of ideas by word and image. That statement was made over 60 years ago, and the main objective today for us is to help building what we refer to as knowledge societies, based on the sharing of knowledge and incorporating all sociocultural and ethical dimensions of sustainable development. Anyway, our main priorities very quickly are to empower people through access to information and knowledge worldwide, with special emphasis on freedom of expression, to promote communication development and advance the use of ICTs in the areas of education, science, and culture. In our quest towards building knowledge societies, we realize that such societies are formed by facilitating access to high-quality content. Access is really a big problem in the developing world. Access to high-quality information, access to information in any form, actually, in an equitable fashion. We have many barriers to access, not just the infrastructure, but also multilingual barriers and skills and many other issues. Cost of access remains a major challenge around the world, even if networks are present. Now, talking about knowledge societies, we see knowledge societies are standing over really four pillars, those corresponding to knowledge creation, preservation, dissemination, and ultimately utilization. Those pillars stand on a foundation of pluralism, inclusion, while respecting human needs and rights. So most of our programs really would fold within one of those pillars. It's all about either knowledge creation in some program, preservation of old heritage and digital heritage, dissemination in so many ways, and ultimately the application area, the utilization. This is just the abstract way of looking at it. But now while we talk in the technology area, we have to recognize what we coin as e-knowledge, referring to knowledge processed in new ways made possible by technology. Now, learning in our generalized vision is really a process of knowledge transfer. Knowledge going from a source to a destination. Now, that source being an author, a publisher, a teacher, an academic institution. On the destination side, that could be a student, a trainee, a library, a web repository. That journey that the knowledge takes from a source to a destination is really dictated by the choice of the delivery technology, the communication channel you choose. In the old days, direct instruction would require just simple content preparation, like lecture-based. It's printed material could be used for that, for mail correspondence as well. But when you try to use videos or TVs, now you have to prepare your content in a different way. Podcasting, internet radio, choices you make on how you deliver knowledge would dictate also how you develop this content. And there are lots of details in the digital content development column that are driven by the choice or the evolution of the delivery technology. There are issues along that journey, from quality control to translation to pedagogy to assessment and certification. So this is just a map of issues involved, ingredients in this picture. Because of the complexity of the picture we just looked at, it offers a great potential, but at the same time, a much wider range of questions and challenges. Now, handling that would not just strictly require academia, but it's much more like a movie-making process. It requires a lot of skills to be blended together, which makes it not so easy to traditional academic institutions, because that's a whole new ball game involving a lot more than just the academic players. It requires media specialists, graphics specialists, software developers, people who understand audio and video, people who are librarians and archivists and so on. So this is a much richer but yet more complex environment. We tried to identify the building blocks for the integration of information communication technologies in knowledge transfer, and we have identified areas that relate to communications infrastructure, capacity building and skill generation, digital content creation and dissemination, a lot of educational issues, pedagogy, instructional design, and the likes, legal and business models relating to copyrights and intellectual property, the information infrastructure as well. We have a lot of programs in those blue blocks, and the sub-branches, which could be very small for you to read, would show you that we're working with too many different countries in one or more of those areas. So, but just to give you an overview of what we are looking at. The reality, though, at the United Nations, which the organization doesn't easily admit, but I'll take liberty to tell you that, is we have a severe shortage of human resources, financial resources, as contrasted with the ambitions of the United Nations. I mean, the ambitions are huge, but the reality is different. So in the last few years, only 3 to 4 years, I think a younger generation of UN staff was able to make a real change in culture by making the point that in order to produce high impact, we have to really optimize on resources, we have to mobilize other players, we have to work together, we have to partner with the rest of stakeholders in a given area. So we are now working more towards standard setting, very large scale projects, extra budgetary projects in different countries, and trying to get a huge multiplier effect through public-private partnerships. Speaking about partnerships, in the last 3 years, we have been able, in the communication information sector, to have global cooperation agreement signed with Microsoft in November 2004, where Bill Gates visited UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And then we signed also a memorandum of understanding with Intel. Then a global partnership with Cisco is going to be signed in November. A very serious collaboration has already started with Apple, with Coriki, with Wolfram Research, and others. So these are very active, very global partnerships through which we have been able to really achieve far more than could have been done with just pure UN resources. Those are strategic partnerships about alignment of objectives and alignment of resources and working really together. So we were very proud to be able to bring together all these companies, some of which compete really in the ground, around the same table in more than one case, and work together, and everybody provides what they could do best. Now, the way we work with the partnerships is we don't forget what we are trying to achieve. We are mandated by the World Summit of Information, WSIS, Information Society, to be the lead agency for e-learning, for e-science, for communication, for cultural and linguistic diversity, among other things. So we fit the companies or the partners to our priorities in ways where they can really provide a contribution. So every one of those companies has a niche area that they're very strong at, and the fitting would work better in one or more of our targets. In terms of large-scale projects, just to give you one or two examples, there are countries like the government of Libya who asked us to do a national implementation of technology in their education system. This is really a virgin land because they were embargoed for so many years, and actually they are at 0 point, which is a challenge but also a benefit. A benefit because you're starting cleanly. There is no prior attempts failing or partial or incomplete. So here we are taking a turnkey project from the ground up. All the ingredients I showed you in this complex diagram are really integrated here. Bahrain is asking for what they call a UNESCO Institute. This is a kind of a center of excellence to help the member states around it for everything involving e-learning, really, to be the hub that people seek, to learn about it, to experiment with it, to have scholarships and study it. It's a big center that we are going to do fundraising for in the next few weeks, and many other similar projects. We have projects in Asia called something called the Next Generation of Teachers. We are working, Stephen mentioned the need for skills. One of our most exciting pieces of work today is something we refer to as ICT Competency Standards for Teachers. This is done with so many partners, and we'll be launching this early January as universal standards for competencies of teachers in the use of ICTs. We've worked with Microsoft on something called the Innovative Teachers Network, working on ICT basic skills training in Africa through community multimedia centers. I'll just jump over a few things, but talking about the competency standards, I'll just show you one big diagram. The idea here is we wanted to get all the players, all the stakeholders in the field of teacher training, and have them agree on what is it that the teachers should know before we call them qualified to that extent or the other. How do we describe competencies? There are so many attempts around the world, but because there are so many, there is no standard. So there is a very hard to say when would you label a teacher as ready to use technology, because teachers are fundamental players if you want this to really happen. And we have finished phase one up there, which is really to have the standard setting, the policy framework, the modular structure for these competencies, and we'll invite the world of whether private sector, government, NGOs, to provide their own training options if they wish, following those standards. And provide them. Actually, our partners here are Microsoft, Intel, Cisco, a lot of academic institutions, the Commonwealth of Learning, the ISTE in the US, and many other governments, the European Commission, and so on. So all the stakeholders are now agreeing on some common set of skill definitions that will lead to a revolution in training solutions that will come in the next year or so. Another exciting development, which might fit very well with what we are discussing here, is we are working with Apple for a while on what we call digital content for development. We're very intrigued by a suite, for example, on an Apple computer today, and many others, but that's one example. They have a suite called iLife, which makes development of digital content quite simple. For those of you who tried to do it 10 years ago, you would know how much we have really advanced. And pretty much anybody who has a laptop like this one can record video and audio without much training, and then store that on places like iTunes, synchronize it to handheld devices, and walk away with it. So in terms of knowledge dissemination, utilization, creation, we found a lot of tools that fit together. Also, for some of you might know that Apple has launched a few weeks ago something called iTunes U, which is not just their music store, which most of us know about, but they have an area within that hosts only educational content. They have partnered with 100 universities in the US, including Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, very distinguished institutions, took audio and video lectures, real lectures in all kinds of subjects, and they are available on iTunes U for free, absolutely free. That experiment, we have worked with them, we discussed this with them, we want to promote it to the rest of the world, to have the largest library of multilingual open and free resources, because this is a huge potential with handheld devices like the iPod, or Graham was showing you this new Shuffle, which is just an iPod, actually a convergence device. I mean, it does everything. It plays video, audio, connects to the internet. So if I can synchronize lectures from the MIT over a device I put in my shirt, I mean, it's a huge, huge potential. Now, of course, for us, we have to worry about cost, about the developing world, about readiness. So there are many more issues to it than just the technical excitement. But the potential is there, the technology is there. It requires a bit of innovation and proper business models to have the impact we desire. We are thinking to use systems like that for what we call takeaway content, or content on the go. Content you put really in your shirt pocket, like I showed you. And we are discussing with a number of partners how to do this, how to build those repositories, who build this content, how we train teachers to do it, how we train students to do it, how we control quality, and then how to facilitate the synchronization to affordable devices that students can walk away with. We're also trying to use the same concepts to build libraries of scientific resources and a global UN digital library. We're also working with the Library of Congress to build the world's first digital library of acquisitions from libraries around the world, and that library will be demoed at UNESCO next week, and we will show it on machines starting from the $100 Negroponte laptop to the Classmate PC of Intel, to Apple desktops, to iPods, to even the iPhone, to show that this same digital content is made to standards that you can see on any device you might have around the world, and in 7 languages. Now, so to summarize what I was trying to share with you, we look at the area of using injecting technology into education in a kind of a holistic approach. And today, in the last few years, we have worked very hard to bring a lot of partners and a lot of stakeholders to this picture. So in this picture, depending on the topic we are addressing, we work with the appropriate partners who have the right tools or have the same objectives. So we have many examples in one or more of these blocks I can share with you whenever we have time, but the ambition is to really serve as many countries with this as possible. And just before I finish, I want to tell you that we are embarking on a study that may be of interest to you. We are going to put an international report that many, many governments have asked us to do. Policymakers want to know that. They wanted us to compare low-cost and or handheld devices for the proper use in education. They want us to compare for them the pros and cons of things like the $100 computer, the Classmate PCs, the PDAs, the iPods. They are just totally confused. So policymakers wanted something credible they can refer to. They usually go to neutral agencies like UN agencies to do that. So I'm just calling for your support to us in this study. We need as much as information as possible. We are commissioning a number of experts and a number of partners to do that with us, but we are going to work on this in the next 6 months. The product is an international report on low-cost devices for education. Thank you very much for your patience.
Want to join us on stage?